guess that shouldn't be confused with like the promoter on a gene. These are things that like, what's a good word? Huh? Oh, I was gonna say encourage. Drive. Encourage, enhance, drive, moves them all. Once the cell is damaged. And again, there's a school of thought, at least for breast cancer, that says that estrogen does both, induce and promote. Cancers involve oncogenes. Sometimes these are viral genes, sometimes these are just mutated genes. These are genes that promote, oncogenes are genes that promote cancer. And there are also things called proto-oncogenes, which are the forms of those genes before they're mutated when they don't induce the cancer. We're good? Oh, no, there's one more category. The thing that makes a malignant cancer the thing that makes a malignant cancer bad is metastasis. And that's why the cancer moves around through the body. So usually, one of the first responses to a tumor, like a lump in the breast or an enlarged prostate, is to remove it and hope that you get it all. Because if it's localized and you can remove it, then you're done. But there are other things that you do after that. Sometimes I just met one of the most awful people in the world. And I won't tell you why. Somebody I talked about him in office actually. So this guy was an oncologist. And one of his ideas was sometimes he says that by doing the surgery to remove the cancer, you actually disturb the cells and that causes them to move around in the body. So it's in his opinion that sometimes surgery may even be the cause of the cancer spread. It probably maybe would have spread anyway, but sometimes the surgery, if not done clean enough, causes it to spread. Which is oftentimes, if it's complicated enough, why they do an entire mastectomy and remove the breast. I think that's all the vocabulary. So let's talk about prostate cancer first. So the number one, I think lung cancer still might be number one in men. But prostate cancer, you typically check for it in two ways. One is a digital rectal exam, so the doctor's feeling for an enlarged prostate. If it's enlarged, and actually it's much more common in black men, I think the risk is like 4 or 5 times higher, and the death rate I think is like 8 times higher if you're black. Oh, like sometimes you can have a benign prostate growth. So you can have prostate disease that's not cancer. And typically as you get older, your prostate starts to grow anyway. That's why, women won't know what I'm talking about. But that's why I like when you go in the men's room and there's like an old guy who's always standing there taking a long time to pee. Because the prostate grows large and it starts to press on your urethra and makes it difficult to urinate. So the prostate grows and gets larger as you grow older anyway. That's irony, right? The testosterone levels are going down, but the prostate, the reason I left this up here. So even though your testosterone levels are going down, your prostate is stimulating itself because it's making DHT. So you're losing all the benefits of testosterone. But now you have this potent androgen that's one, making you go bald. And two, it's helping your prostate to enlarge. The other way that they check for it is something called PSA, prostate-specific antigen. So if you're developing prostate disease or prostate cancer, you make this protein, prostate-specific antigen. And actually, I don't know if they measure it in your urine or your blood. Just probably be revealing that I don't get mine checked. I'm not sure how to do it. If you develop prostate cancer, this is one of the, one, they remove the prostate. Then typically, in case it's spread or something like that, they would give this compound and another one that's used. Again, you don't have to know this, but I want you to see what it looks like. It's flutamide, and this actually binds to and blocks the androgen receptor. In extreme cases, and I noticed somebody that had this happen, in advanced cases, you would be castrated, so they would remove the testicles, they'd remove the prostate, remove the testicles so that there's no source of androgen, and you might be on this chemical treatment to block any residual androgens from the adrenal gland. In other cases, they do things like that, things that aren't related to hormones. They do chemotherapy and radiation therapy. And the idea is chemo and radiation therapy kill any cells that are developing fast. So you kill the cancer cells, but you also, as you know, you lose your hair because those are cells that are very active, and you have problems digesting because the cells that line your intestine, your digestive tract, also get killed by chemo and radiation therapy. Sometimes, like my graduate student's father had prostate cancer, they inject a radioactive pellet into the cancer, and hopefully, it sounds ironic because radiation can cause mutations that cause cancer, but in this case, they inject a radioactive pellet, and it kills the cells, for example, in the prostate and nearby. But these are typically the endocrine treatments, finasteride and flutamide. We're good? In other cases, in other cases, a good fit aromatase is involved. So there are prostate cancers that are estrogen regulated. So there's aromatase expression develops in the prostate for whatever reason, I don't know why. You make excess estrogen, and that estrogen, when bound to ER alpha, the estrogen receptor, can stimulate the growth of those prostate cells. So aromatase blockers have been important. But the other thing that's important is in people who tend to be less likely to get prostate cancers, they have a different kind of metabolism.
Can you repeat what you said about when there's excess estrogen?
I'll do it in 1 second. Yep. Yes, I can. Let me do this first. testosterone. Okay, so what I'm saying, Dina, is in some prostate cancers, estradiol is important. So some prostate cancers express aromatase. You produce estradiol, and estradiol binds to ER alpha, the estrogen receptor, and stimulates growth of the prostate cancer. So aromatase is actually bad. So people who have high expression of aromatase in their prostate are more likely to develop breast cancer. The DHT binds to the androgen receptor. That can also be bad. Some people are protected because they express this enzyme. That converts the DHT into this androstenediol called A2. That's good because the androstenediol binds to ER beta, another estrogen receptor, and that ER beta actually binds to and blocks the actions of ER alpha. Binds to the ERE and blocks the actions of ER alpha. I'll say all that again. So people at higher risk of prostate cancer are those who express 5-alpha reductase and generate the DHT, which binds to the androgen receptor and stimulates the damaged cells to grow. Those with high aromatase expression are also at high risk because you generate estradiol, which can bind to ER alpha and also stimulate prostate cancer. So 5-alpha reductase blockers are important in treating prostate cancer. And also, there's an aromatase inhibitor. Again, you don't have to know this one. Made by my good friends at Novartis. This compound actually blocks aromatase and is important in treating prostate cancer. Some men are protected because they actually produce this androstenediol, and androstenediol binds ER beta, and ER beta, that estrogen receptor, tends to bind to the ERE, so the ER alpha now doesn't have access to it, and so that helps prevent prostate cancer. These other compounds down here, the 6-hydroxy, androstenediol triol, and the 7-hydroxy androstenediol triol, these are waste products that get excreted. So if you express these enzymes, if you make the 5-alpha androstenediol, and then these two secreted products, then you're less likely to develop prostate cancer. We're good?
So you would find the waste products in the urine?
Yeah, I presume they're secreted in the urine, but they're inactive. They don't bind to the androgen receptor or either of the estrogen receptors, so they're inactive products. Whereas this, well, the DHT obviously still binds the androgen receptor very, very well, and the estradiol obviously binds the estrogen receptor. Yeah.
Is there any difference between those two on the
Between what?
byproducts?
This? Yeah, so this is a 6-hydroxy, and this should be a 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 7. 6. Yeah, that's right. So this is a 6-hydroxy, androstenediol triol, and the other one's 7-hydroxy. And there's 2 enzymes to do that, a 6-hydroxylase and a 7. We're good? In breast cancer, letrozole is also going to be important in breast cancer. You may have heard BRCA1 and 2, I think there's 2 of them, right? Stands for breast cancer early. Early what? Early onset or something like that? Breast cancer early onset. So the gene, these genes have become quite popular in terms of, in the cancer world, in breast cancer. Although, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think they're specific to breast cancer. So what the genes are, they code for proteins that work with a complex of other proteins to correct DNA damage. So these aren't bad genes. These are genes that work with a complex to correct for DNA damage. So they actually kind of prevent you from getting breast cancer. But they're mutated forms of these genes that don't make the corrections properly. So if you test positive, one of my friends, I've got a friend that has everything I tell you. So one of my friends who's my age just tested positive. Wasn't there some actress? Angelina Jolie. So if you test positive, you have a much, I don't know what the number is, but you have a much higher risk. 80%, I said, much higher risk, 80% of getting breast cancer, and well, I'll tell you what I think in a second. I can tell me if I'm wrong.
And ovarian.
Breast and uterine, I think. So typically, if you test for the mutated form of these, like my friend, who's my age, she had a mastectomy and a hysterectomy. So I think they're removing the ovaries because they're removing a source of estrogen, but they're also removing the uterus because of the potential for uterine cancer. So with an 80% higher risk of breast cancer, some people choose, like Angelina Jolie and my friend, to just have their breast and uterus removed at around maybe 45 or whenever it's detected. It's not because the genes are bad, it's that if you have the mutated form, you have a much higher rate. And I think, this is where I say correct if I'm wrong. I think it's not just related to breast cancer. I think it's true for any cancer. It's just that those are the parts, those are one of the top cancers, and those are the parts that you can remove for prevention. But I think it puts you at higher risk for any cancer. Because I don't think the gene, I don't think it's specific to mammary tissue, is it? But it's just you don't have the proper DNA repair if you have this. All right, I'll listen for a while. So typically, breast cancer, 70% of breast cancer is estrogen dependent. And most breast cancer is treated with tamoxifen, which we had before. I don't know if I ever drew it for. Tamoxifen is an estrogen blocker, which we talked about before. It's a SERM. You guys don't know what it is by now. So it's this crazy thing. Of course, the problems are, it's an agonist in the uterus, so it increases the risk of uterine cancer. Again, it doesn't cause it, but because it acts like an estrogen, it promotes it in the uterus. It's typically an antagonist in mammary tissue. And depending on whose paper you read, it can be an antagonist or an agonist on bone. After menopause, it's typically a agonist on bone, but it can be an antagonist on bone prior to menopause. It can be an antagonist or an agonist on bone. Most of the stuff you read says it's an agonist on bone, but premenopausal, it can actually be an antagonist on bone. Don't ask me why. In addition, some people develop insensitivity to tamoxifen, so if you've taken it for a while, you can stop responding. And in some cases, the cells, the cancers actually can even start to respond positively to tamoxifen. I don't know, does anybody know how or why? Oh, so you have to be off of tamoxifen after 5 years. And that's probably because either you become resistant to it or the cells evolve in such a way that they actually start responding positively to the tamoxifen. Which actually is not funny as in haha, but it's interesting that, again, both for men, your androgen levels are going down, you're getting an androgen-dependent disease. The same for breast cancer is most likely to occur after menopause, when estrogen levels are lower than they've ever been in their life. And the couple reasons for that are, one, turns out fibroblasts around the breast cancers express aromatase. So even though your circulating levels of estrogen are low, there's local production of estrogen. And in fact, letrozole, that's what letrozole is used for, is to stop local aromatase production if you've had breast cancer or if you're at risk. So it's to stop local production of estrogen. The other things that seem to be important are your lifetime exposure to estrogen. And I always say this backwards. So the highest rate of breast cancer is in nuns. Did I say that the right way? The highest rate of breast cancer, every year I say it the wrong way, is in nuns because they typically don't get pregnant. So the more you're pregnant, the less likely you are to get breast cancer. And it's probably because your progesterone to estrogen ratio is high. Your estrogen is relatively low if you stay pregnant and breastfeeding a lot. So the more babies you have, the less likely you are to get breast cancer. The earlier you go through puberty, the more likely you are to get breast cancer. The later you go through menarche, the later you go through menopause, I think I screwed that up immediately. The later you go through menopause, the more likely you are to get breast cancer. So your lifetime exposure to estrogen is very important. If you're black, you actually have a lower incidence of breast cancer, but a much higher death rate for breast cancer. Actually, from all cancers, if you're black, you're more likely, you have a much higher mortality rate. Anyway, I forgot what I was about to say. There are a couple of other things that are important for estrogen production. So, E2 can be metabolized to at least two so-called catechol estrogens. Some people, there's at least some data to suggest that these catechol estrogens, in particular, the 2,3 one, this one, that these can initiate or induce breast cancer because that high electronegativity, remind me of chemistry, so I'm on the edge of what I don't know what I'm talking about. That structure can damage DNA and generate mutations that can lead to cancer. So people who have the enzymes, which you should be able to tell me what they are, right? 2-hydroxylase and 4-hydroxylase. People have the enzymes to make these compounds, which I think otherwise they're neurotransmitters somewhere in the brain. But if you make these in your mammary cells, that compound in particular can damage DNA. There's an enzyme Alright, I'm gonna erase this. enzyme it kind of caps these things off with a methyl group. It's like a methyl transferase or something like that. And people with high levels of this enzyme, it's thought, tend to have a lower incidence of breast cancer because they, even if they produce this compound, they have an enzyme that's kind of capping that off. And that compound no longer can damage the DNA and also can't bind the estrogen receptor. These catecholestrgens, in addition to causing the damage to the cells and initiating or inducing the cancer, they can also promote it by binding to the estrogen receptor and stimulating the cell that they caused the damage in the first place. We're good? Questions or comments? I have a few more steroids to draw for you, and I promise we're done. Yes? Yeah, sorry. Not messy anyway. Wow, this one you can figure out. So there's several ways to metabolize and get rid of estradiol, which we've talked about before. You can either put glucose or sulfates at the 3 and 17 position. So you can make 17 glucuronide estradiol, where there's a glucose attached to the 17 position. You can make 3 glucuronide estradiol. You can make 3 17 diglucuronide estradiol. You can make 3 sulfate estradiol. You can make 17 sulfate. You can make 3 sulfate 17 glucuronide. You guys get the picture? So it turns out, though, that all of those combinations, if you have either a sulfate or a glucose on the 3 position or a glucose on the 17 position, the cells, particularly cancerous cells, can take those moieties off and reactivate the estradiol. So there's an enzyme that if you make 3 sulfate, there's an enzyme that can take that sulfate off and reactivate the estradiol. But the 17 sulfate form, so either of these can still be activated. So that if you're more likely to get breast cancer, if you have those enzymes to take these moieties off, which should make the estradiol jump, and you pee it out. If you have the enzymes to reactivate those, I just remembered the other thing I was going to say. If you have the enzymes to take these things off, then you're more likely to get breast cancer. Or if your preferred metabolite is the 17 sulfate, there apparently is no enzyme. This is work by somebody named Pasqualini. There's apparently no enzyme that can take that 17 sulfate off. So if you highly express the sulfosyltransferase in your breast tissue, you're more likely to make this waste product and less likely to develop breast cancer. Because that compound, 1, can't bind the estrogen receptor, the 17 sulfate form, and you can't turn it back into estradiol. You have to pee it. So it can be 317 disulfate, it can be 3 glucuronide, 17 sulfate, doesn't matter. As long as the 17 sulfate is there, that's a dead end product. So people who make more of the 17 sulfate have some protection relative to people who make the other compounds and or who have the enzymes to reactivate those steroids. Questions or comments?
So
Yeah.
the other ones without the sulfate or glucose groups at the 17th position, they still can't bind the estrogen receptor, right?
You know, I don't know the answer. I don't know if they can bind the estrogen receptor or if they're cleaved first, but they're still active in the cell. My guess is they're cleaved first, because if you have a big glucose on there, my guess is you can't bind. So, My guess is, yeah, they deglucuronate it, desulfate it first, and then they bind the estrogen receptor. But the 17-sulfate, you can't take the 17-sulfate off. Yeah.
So the glucose and the sulfate are added to the estrogen in the same cell that is.
In cancer cells, yes, but typically I think it happens in the liver. So typically you metabolize the steroids by the liver, and it's the kidney that filters them out. Because once they're like that, they can't get back in the cell. Once they've made hydrophilic, they can't bind the binding protein, the SHBG, and they're soluble in the blood, and so you urinate them out. But I think in these cases, it's the cancer cells themselves that modify the steroid, and typically you'd be getting rid of it, but then these cells are reactivating it and allowing it to serve the cell.
So the cancer cells are also making 17-sulfate.
Presumably, yes, but they have no capacity to take it off. It's a dead-end product. Other stuff? So I just remember the other thing I was going to say before. You guys probably heard of triple negative? So this triple negative breast cancer, I didn't usually write P negative, or PR, negative, negative, HER2 negative. So triple negative breast cancer is the bad one, and I think minority women are more likely to get it. And it's the bad one because they don't have estrogen receptors, so you can't treat it with tamoxifen. They don't have progesterone receptors, so they're not responsive to antiprogestins. And they don't have this HER2, which stands for human epidermal growth factor receptor. Human epidermal growth factor receptor, right? Or epidermal growth factor receptor. And this is bad because typically these three, that's what's usually exploited to treat breast cancer. For example, the estrogen blockers. So if you have a triple negative breast cancer, that's when it's very aggressive and very difficult to treat. Questions or comments? I have one other thing I want to tell you, but I think it's too long for it. Yeah, but I can't tell you in 3 minutes. So questions or comments, I'll go give a little bit of lecture on Tuesday, but the rest will be devoted to your questions. Comment?
You said they don't have those receptors like at all, or
Not in their breast cancer. Well, I mean, so they have the private receptor somewhere, but not in the cancer. So typically, for example, tamoxifen won't work if you're triple negative, if you're not expressing the estrogen receptor, because you're not estrogen responsive. The antiprogestin treatments, antagonists, won't work, and the treatments that they use to block HER won't work because your cells are responding independently. So, yeah.
If the cancer cells produce 17-sulfate estrogen, is that counterproductive?
If what?
If the cancer cells produce 17-sulfate estrogen?
It's not counterproductive because that's a dead end. If you make 17-sulfate, you need to get rid of it. If you don't make it, then those other compounds can actually stimulate the cells. So it's actually protective that you make the 17-sulfate. So it's less likely that you'll have an aggressive estrogen-dependent breast cancer if you metabolize that, if that makes any sense. That's not a treatment, that's just a correlation with people who have bad experiences with, not that anybody has a good one, but you know what I mean. All right, so I'll see. You come for questions on Tuesday. There's a little bit more stuff. We'll talk about uterine cancer and intrauterine exposure, and other than that, it's all yours for questions. See you Tuesday. I'll see you tomorrow at office hours.